Congressman, good to see you again.
Good to see you again,
Thank you
too.
for having coffee with us. I remember, and I've shared this with you before, I remember 2010, 2012, being at your campaign headquarters, and I said, do you really know what you're getting into? Do you really want this? And looking back at that time to where you are now, has it been what you thought it would be, being in Washington?
Well, it's always an honor to be able to serve our community and our country and give back. That said, I wish we were getting more done, right? I mean, the level of gridlock was not what I expected.
Right. How's the travel? I mean, how far are you back and forth? How often are you making that trip?
Yeah, I try to fly home most weekends, and you learn how to sleep like this in an airplane seat.
Right. So how often are you back here, and how often are you in D.C.? It just depends. Are you trying to get back here much?
I am. So, it's the best way to stay connected with the folks back home. Despite the gridlock out in Washington, D.C., where I think we've done our most productive work is helping constituents. We've helped thousands of folks, veterans, seniors, get their Medicare and Social Security benefits. It's been pretty good. And that type of work, when you can help that individual navigate the federal government, is really rewarding.
So looking back before you were elected for the first time and where you are now, what is a thing that you didn't see coming? What did you imagine the job was going to be like, and what is it really?
I actually thought we would be solving problems that everyone agrees that we've got to address the issue of prescription drug prices. Well, let's start with what we agree on and that common ground. And just, again, the level of bottlenecking. It doesn't do us any good if we just pass legislation out of the House and it doesn't get taken up in the Senate. And that I think the public gets frustrated with, and certainly can be a grind on folks like me who actually want to compromise and find middle ground.
How do you deal with feedback? I mean, do you have a thick skin, a thicker skin? Has it been hard to hear things anybody would hear in public office? The criticisms, how are you with that?
Well, running for public office and serving and being a representative is not for the faint of heart. So you can't take things personally. We do monthly town halls, and folks show up, especially at a time like now when you're going through an impeachment inquiry and so forth. There's passions on both sides, and that said, our core job is to be accessible to our constituents, and you can't do that without allowing them to express their opinions.
You went to medical school, you became a physician, you're probably doing pretty well doing that. Why would you give that up for this?
I feel blessed with everything I've been able to do in my life, to go to community colleges and public schools, go to medical school and afford to go to school. My parents were immigrants from India, and that is the American dream. And this is about giving back and allowing that next generation the same opportunities we had.
Since you were first elected until now, how would you describe your soul? Moderate, progressive? Where would you describe you are? I guess we could look at your votes, but your perspective.
I describe myself as pragmatic. One of the first groups that I found...
That wasn't one of my choices. Go ahead.
But pragmatic. So I tend to be one of the more moderate members, in the sense that a group I started was the Problem Solvers Caucus. It was an even group of Democrats and Republicans, and again, a lot of us went to Washington, D.C. to actually get stuff done. And I'm still an optimist. I actually think coming out of this next election cycle, there's a real opportunity to start bringing folks together.
You mentioned the word impeachment a couple of minutes ago. I assume you've either been there or been watching. Okay, where are you with this?
As a senior member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, our committee's in the middle of a lot of this. Doesn't give me pleasure that we're going through an impeachment inquiry. That said, the president left us very little choice. We were trying to do our responsibility as the House of Representatives is to do oversight and be a check on the president. President made a decision to withhold funding that we gave in a bipartisan way to Ukraine. It's our job to ask, why did you make that decision and who made that decision? He's stymied us, and unfortunately we've ended up where we are.
Are you ready to vote on this? Do you need to see more witnesses, more information coming in, or which way are you going with this?
Well, I think this is about getting to the truth, and we've seen a couple names pop up repeatedly. John Bolton, we heard Mick Mulvaney in a public press conference admit that they actually withheld the funding for political purposes. And Vice President Pence's name has popped up repeatedly. I actually think we ought to have those folks in. If the president hasn't done anything wrong, then the folks closest to him ought to be able to clear him.
if it comes to a vote today, I'm trying to get this out of you. If it comes to a vote today, what would you vote?
Well, we'd have to see what the actual charges are, right? So they've gone through the inquiry. I think there is evidence that is impeachable. I think there clearly was an abuse of power, clearly an obstruction of justice. Let's see how they craft those articles, and then I can make the decision based on the articles in front of us.
So there's nothing you've seen right now that you would vote, say, no impeachment. You're more apt to say, you know where I'm going with this. You're more apt to be in favor of that based on what you've seen so far. Not asking for you to say yes or no per se, but which way would you be leaning?
Well, let me answer the question this way. I
please.
think the president has committed impeachable offenses.
Okay.
That said, it's never good for the country to go down a path of impeachment, but knowing what I know and knowing what I've seen, both in the depositions that I sat in on as well as the public hearings, it does look like it's pretty indefensible for the president to say he didn't do anything.
Okay, I'll take that. So you mentioned that you're pragmatic, correct?
Right.
So for you, not all Democrats are always happy with you.
Right.
You are also Indian American, which is another thing that you have. And also as an Indian American, you have the religious aspect under that headline with Sikhs, Hindus, and all of that. You have a lot on your plate than most other people might. Tell me how you handle that.
Again, the same way you handle anything else. Be accessible, listen to all sides. I do take a lead role on kind of U.S.-India, U.S.-South Asia relations.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
India is the largest democracy in the world, and we need allies like India. Obviously, the diaspora here is complicated, lots of different elements. But that said, I think the Indian American community in that broad diversity, that's its strength as well.
Mm-hmm. So you've run against Scott Jones, you've run against Doug Osee, Dan Lundgren. Is there a particular election that stands out most in your mind from having run against those three? I would preface that by saying I thought the Osee Bera was as nasty as anything we've seen as television advertising viewers.
That was a $25 million race. Both sides spent a lot of money, and I think someone actually added it up. It was 14,000 commercials from Labor Day to Election Day.
And none positive. Really, it was hard.
It was a tough knockdown, drag-out election, and we've gotten used to that. Running against Dan Lundgren, Scott Jones, those were all also pretty tough races. I think that having to go through tough races like that also means you have to be accountable to your constituents, and I think the country would actually be better served if they had more evenly split districts like ours.
Have you been watching the Democratic presidential debates? Do you have time for that?
I catch bits and pieces of it, and certainly I know a lot of the candidates that are running and have personal relationships with them.
Anybody you like, and anybody you would say, this is who I support? Is it too soon, or can you give me a name or two?
I haven't endorsed anyone at this juncture. Obviously, I'm
because that'll put them over the top.
Right, exactly.
When Ami Bera
they're
makes
waiting
his
for that
decision,
endorsement.
This is the one.
Obviously, I'm close to Vice President Biden. Having served with him when he was vice president for 4 years, I think he's got the ability to heal the country. Our home state senator still is in the race. I was one of the few members of Congress that endorsed Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete, when he was running for DNC chair. So I got to know Pete fairly well. I think he's a very intelligent, hardworking individual, and he's surprised a lot of us that he's been able to put this race together. I'm not sure that he's ready to be president just yet, but he's got a bright future ahead of him. And at the end of the day, I'd like to vote for someone and endorse someone who can heal this country and who's ready to serve on day one, because the level of disruption President Trump has done, there really is no time for a learning curve.
Can the Democratic Party get behind the nominee? Last time with Hillary, a lot of the Bernie people just weren't feeling it, and it showed. Do you feel that it would be different this time, no matter who the nominee is, that everybody will get together considering the opponent?
Well, I would hope so. I would hope that, in elections, you're either voting for someone or you're voting against someone. It's a binary choice. And in this case, the alternative choice is Donald Trump. So I would hope every Democrat and a lot of independents and a lot of Republicans that are uncomfortable with President Trump's policies come together and help start healing this country.
Where do you stand on health care? Have you evolved? where are you with all of the, Elizabeth Warren has a plan, Joe Biden has a plan saying Elizabeth Warren's plan won't work. So where are you with all this? I mean, you're a physician, you know the drill here.
Absolutely, and that's one of the areas where I'm proudest in terms of some of the policy that we put forth. I'm not a Medicare For All guy, and that's gotten me in trouble with some of the progressive elements of our party. That said, in a country like ours, I think everyone should have access to care. If they get sick, they should be able to go see a doctor, and they shouldn't worry about going bankrupt if they get really sick. And we can get there, and we can actually raise the quality of care and lower the cost. I'd start probably closer to where Vice President Biden is, where build off of the Affordable Care Act. We've seen it work here in California, where we've cut the number of uninsured in half. We know there's another 10 to 13 million Americans that already qualify for no cost or very low cost health insurance. They're just not signing up. So how do we get those people into the risk pool? And then that leaves you, several million that you have to go out there and find and get in there. But I wouldn't do Medicare for All.
What's the most enjoyable part of your job? You're in Washington, D.C. Do you enjoy going to fundraisers, mixers, meeting other people? Is that an extra part of the job which is difficult? I mean, you're busy all day, and then what about the other aspect of your job?
I love the United States of America and our history. So, being in Washington, D.C., being a member of Congress allows you to be right in the middle of that historic city. So that is always fun. This may sound unusual, but I've got a lot of friends that are Republican members of Congress, and to get to know someone who represents small town Kentucky or rural Ohio, they're just doing their job. They're just seeing something different than I am when I come back to Sacramento County, and we've got to get past this judging one another. And I think the best part of this is the friendships that I've made with members of Congress.
Well, you mentioned bipartisan, and that was kind of the way it used to be before Twitter, Facebook, before the cable shows. The Tip O'Neills of the world were able to get with the Bob Doles and in a back room over a sandwich say, let's do this, and it would get done. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore, and maybe more people who are willing to work with their partners across the aisle, which you seem to be doing. Is that not a good thing?
That is very much a good thing. That's exactly how our government should work, because again, we're a very diverse country, and I get that person who's flying home to rural Ohio is seeing something different than I'm seeing when I come home to Sacramento County. But we're all Americans, and we've got to figure out how to not fight all the time, but actually start solving problems. Again, part of the reason why I like Vice President Biden is his 36 years in the Senate. He's got those deep relationships, and we saw it when he was in the Obama administration, his ability to go to the floor of the Senate and get the votes. And we need someone like that who understands the institution and is willing to work together.
What do you say to people who are under the impression, and it may be true, that right now everything that's going on in Washington is about the president, about impeachment? Is any other stuff getting done for your constituents or anybody watching to know? What else is there?
It is. I mean, they sent us there not to do impeachment. They sent us there to address prescription drug prices. I know we're working on a big bill that hopefully we vote on before the end of the year. We talk about infrastructure. The president talks about it. We ought to find that middle ground and get something done on infrastructure. We all have roads, bridges, highways that are falling apart all across this country. That should be a bipartisan no-brainer.
Donald Trump, your reaction?
Unique individual.
Yes.
So, thank you. Look, he probably would take this as a compliment. He's been very disruptive. But in that disruption, he's given us an opportunity to rethink, what does the Department of Education look like in the 21st century? What is a modern State Department? And I've spent most of my time certainly trying to hold the line on some of what I think are bad policies from President Trump, but we can't just fight him all the time. We've also got to think about, if given the opportunity with a Democratic president in January of 2021, where do we want to go? And I don't think we should just rebuild what we had before. I think we should build what we need for the 21st century and also start healing these wounds and the things that divide us.
Donald Trump, the president, has been similar to Donald Trump, the candidate. So if he was elected after having been true to himself, what makes you think that he won't be reelected? Or
look,
right, it could very easily happen.
Look, I I would give it a 50-50 chance right now that Donald Trump gets reelected. It's hard to unseat an incumbent president. Again, I don't think he's taken us in the right direction. And what I mean by that is I actually want to start healing this country. I think he's exposed the divisions and widened those divisions. I think we need to elect a president who is going to be a president for all of America, not just his base, and will start bringing us together, finding common ground, healing the institutions. And I don't think Donald Trump has done that.